Hello, everyone. Welcome to Deep Dive into Authentic Leadership, hosted by Mark Anthony Johnson. He's a global people business partner at TikTok. We're really excited for this session. Mark, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Barbara, and welcome to you all. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend it with us today as we discuss deep dive into authentic leadership. So as Barbara mentioned, my name is Mark Anthony Johnson. I'm one of the global people business partners at TikTok, and I've been with the company for over about a year and a half. And as we go through today's presentation, I'll give you a bit more insight into my background, but very curious to really understand from you what you think authenticity is and how we can go ahead and give you some pieces of information that you can take as you craft your authentic leadership journey. So through today's discussion, what I'd like to do is spend a little bit more time actually looking a bit more at your personal story, understanding how your story helped create the values that you have come to possess, and then spending a bit of time about self-awareness. Many of us know what the concept is by the fact that you are attending today's session. That also means that you also are self-aware, but we want to do a deeper dive into what components tend to really heighten a person's self-awareness, particularly as they look to create certain events for success in the future, and how that ties into authentic leadership, and then some final key takeaways. So for the purpose of today's conversation, there's many different series happening at the BYP event, which is great, and taking a look at introversion, leadership, CVs. For the purpose of today's conversation, and due to time, we're going to focus on really three ingredients around authentic leadership. Your story, so what events created who you are and what you're doing. Your values, how did those events help create those values that you have today? And how is your current situation creating certain values that will be created for the future or that you may continue to have from the past? And then the last one is around self-awareness. So how do you continue to evolve your self-awareness over time? So in your opinion, many of us know what authenticity is, but if you want to use the chat feature, in your personal opinion, what does authenticity mean to you? I'm very curious if many of you just want to use chat around when you think about being authentic or you've seen other authentic individuals, what characteristics or traits do those individuals have for yourself? If you would like to use the chat function, and then we can see what some of your responses are. Not too many responses coming in. All right, Brandon, brave soul, thanks. Confident in their peculiarities, not one of the herd. I actually really like that. Someone that is just beats to their own drum. They're not with the herd. They're confident, being their true self, not caring about other people. So thanks. Temitope, I hope I said that correct. Jess, no censoring, leading with your strengths. Authenticity, unapologetically being yourself and allowing vulnerability. So really great, I think these are great ideas and also true components of what authenticity means. I pulled together a couple of sources to define it, and it actually summarizes what you all just put through the chat. It's a concept rooted in psychology, existential psychotherapy, existential philosophy, and aesthetics. It's the degree to which a person's actions are congruent with his or her values and desires, despite external pressures to social conformity. Authenticity is the quality of being genuine or real, someone who isn't afraid to be who they are, but they're confident, including their personality, their values, and principles in life. Similar to what you all just said, they're not following the herd, they're not conforming, they're following their intuition, and they're staying true to who they are unapologetically. That leads us into your story. So how do we really get to being authentic? What are some characteristics or events that either help or really prevent a person living their true authentic life? So what is our personal story? What is your personal story? Just to help guide us, A personal story is a personal, authentic account that is summarizing all of the important life events and experiences that have contributed to who you are today. So all of these events from birth to university to our adulthood really contributes underneath and really helps create who we are. What I'd like to do is allow us to spend a little bit of time going through this a bit more. If you have a pen and pad handy, I want you to grab that, or if you just want to open up a separate tab and begin to actually doodle a couple of things, I want to take you through what's called a Lifeline exercise. And a Lifeline exercise is a learning tool that we use to really help summarize and introduce yourself with a story. In psychology, sometimes we use narrative therapy and some techniques to actually help individuals understand who they are and where they came from for the purpose of what is the narrative that they want to create. This exercise helps us really understand who an individual is, what their identity is, and how that came to be through their life experiences, their histories, their cultures. It's also influenced by when you were born, where you live, where you actually immigrated from. And we look at all of these characteristics to see what were some of those key milestones that contributed to who you are today, that also shaped and is shaping some of the decisions that you are actually taking on a daily basis. So let's bring this to life a little bit more. Earlier, I told you my name is Mark Johnson. Barbara helped introduce me, and that I'm a global people business partner at TikTok. Now, what the Lifeline does is allows us to see what's above the line, which is what I somewhat just articulated, and what's visible on LinkedIn, and probably what was in the BYP event to summarize some of the speakers for today. And there are also likely some assumptions that many of you have seeing me as well, you know, a Black guy, and there are other components that you may infer by how I come across on the screen. Below, the invisible and unvoiced. So these are things that we may assume, we may never know about me. And what the Lifeline does is help us actually articulate this all for the benefit of others, but more importantly, for the benefit of ourselves. We talked a little bit around what's visible. Sometimes, you know, I may identify as a male, but it could be that I identify as something different as well. So sometimes what's above the line or what's visible actually is probably a good indicator of who we are. But actually, until we start discussing and revealing our story a little bit more, there's a lot more underneath that that meets the eye that individuals may not be aware of. So, to bring this home, I'll give you a little bit of insight about my Lifeline. And then what I'd like to do is actually understand a little bit more about yours. So my Lifeline, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. You can probably tell already by the accent that I was not raised in the UK. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, so my family were very spiritual and religious. And then unfortunately, my parents split when I was a bit younger. And then my father ultimately passed away when I was about 13. And at that time, I was focused on really just being in the religion and not really pursuing university studies. But then I started getting unsure. I went to be an electrician, but wasn't really sure that was the right path, and questioned everything from religion, my sexuality, my education. So I ultimately left the religion and then enrolled in a university in New York, got a full-time job, and did both at the same time. Then decided, you know what, I actually need to get away from New York. I'm going to move to San Francisco and further my studies. And that's where I was able to get my bachelor's degree in philosophy and psych. And then I returned to New York after that, thinking I'll go ahead and now continue my life. I came out as being gay when I was in San Francisco and made awesome people. But then I actually did not really feel as connected to New York anymore, and San Francisco was my home. So I packed up once more again and then moved to San Francisco, got a job in HR, and then gradually started taking on different roles within HR, and then went back to school to actually become a counseling psychologist, and then moved to London initially for work, but then ended up staying and transferring with my company at that time, and then got married in 2017. So this is just a high-level indication of my personal Lifeline. And imagine if I go back to the introduction wherein I just talked about who I was, and imagine if I introduced myself and gave you a bit more insight. You know, my name is Mark. I identify as him and his. I'm a gay Black male. My parents are actually Costa Rican. Their great-grandparents were Jamaican, followed by Nigerian. And I grew up in America with my siblings. We were first generation. And then I did my studies, as we discussed, between New York and San Francisco, where I pursued my degrees in philosophy and psych and became a counseling psychologist, but also had a dual career as an HR practitioner. And I love travel, culture, and cycling. So going back to the example we had in terms of what's visible and voiced and what's unvoiced, our story helps us really articulate why we are focused in the activities that we're doing today. So for me personally, I was really attracted to knowledge, and that was through my questioning and looking to seek it, which really attracted me to psych and philosophy. But then also I loved actually pursuing and coming out, because it allowed me to be authentic in my skin. And I also wanted to coach and help others develop, and why I was attracted to HR, to really use my strength, but leverage others as well. Academically, it made me actually go into the pursuit, both in HR and coaching, but psychology. And I was able to extend my family by gaining more friends and others in San Francisco alongside my immediate family in New York. So why did I go through that? I wanted to give a bit more insight about myself, but B, I'm more curious to hear about you and your story, and to have you do a bit of an exercise right now. What I'd like you to do is the same exercise, and we may not have time to do this exhaustively, so I will invite you to really do this evening or this weekend, in the next few weeks when you have a bit more time. But just for the purpose, for a couple of minutes, maybe about 3-5 minutes, I want you to reflect on your story. And when you look back at your life, what were some of the most influential experiences over the course of your life so far? And what key junctions on your journey influenced the decisions or the paths that you are making today? I want you to go ahead and just draw a line. As you see here on the right-hand side, all of your positive experiences will be above the line, and any negative experiences will be below the line. And those events could entail your academic pursuits, family, culture, having children, getting married. It include immigrating. Anything that you think was a major event that really helped shape your life to who you are today. And I want you to just reflect on any learnings, anything that really has resonated and stuck with you. And just draw a line on a piece of paper, and or if you want to open a separate tab, and then plot some of those experiences. I'm gonna just go on mute, give you about 3 to 5 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A section as well. And I want you to just spend some time plotting a few events, and I'll give you 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll come back together and discuss what some of those areas were for you. And again, if there are any questions that you have, feel free to use the Q&A feature, and I'll be able to help you through that section. As you think through your life events, this could be anything from when you were very young to maybe when you were a bit more older, around 5-7 years old. It's just up to you personally to choose which events from birth to present you want to actually plot. We'll give you another 2-3 minutes, and then we'll look to convene. If some of you are finished sooner, feel free to use the chat. We're just curious to hear what are some of the events, either positive or that could be less positive, that you feel comfortable sharing in this forum that you think help shape some of your actions today. What were some of those key events that are connected to what you're doing today, to perhaps some event, either positive or negative, that happened in the past? We'll give you another minute or two. You will have time after this event to finish your Lifeline, but we'll look to just really capture some of those key themes from many of you who are attending today, if you're comfortable enough sharing. So Marcia, thank you. We'll start coming together as well. Thank you for sharing. Moving to England was both good and bad. And Marcia, if you want to elaborate a little bit on that, what made it good and bad from your perspective? Aletta, and apologies in advance if I'm mispronouncing any names. Feel free. I'm hoping to connect with many of you after, but I'm hoping I'm getting some of the pronunciation correct. Healing, setting boundaries, and being authentic. I think the word healing is key. Many of us are very comfortable in life sharing our positive experiences. The negative experiences, it really takes a trusting friendship or relationship in order to elicit that. So Lita, I really appreciate you sharing that, but healing our negative trauma or past or negative situations, because that's key and very connected to our success today. Brandon, thank you for disclosing, and being diagnosed with ADD and using that as a positive experience to improve your self-awareness, and I'm sure to communicate it with others. So thank you for being brave and courageous and sharing that with us today as well and disclosing. Luis, moving to Birmingham and experiencing a negative injury. So again, I'm sure health is something that's important for you. Better lifestyle, Marcia, thanks for coming back and elaborating a bit more. And the system of support, so really good. So many of you really, really appreciate you sharing, moving to Germany, starting your first web comic. So really, really great. And I really appreciate you all sharing this today. And what's the purpose of this? Many times at work, in life, we actually present an image to someone. We went through this introduction before, and there are many other times when we are, so I'll just turn that off. Apologies. There are many other times when we are not disclosing too much. And I appreciate what many of you did through this chat, disclosing a bit more, giving some of the highs, giving some of the negative areas. And the key part here is that your events are very, very intricate to the insights as to why you behave or act the way that you do. And these insights really are attached to the highs and the lows that you experienced in the past, but they're very connected to what you're doing today as to when you will feel most energetic, to when you will feel even more exhausted. And there is a lot of meaning there from what you've been feeling, what you've been hearing. I think someone talked about the system of support. Every event that has happened in the past is reoccurring today and eliciting a response, but there are some ways that we can reflect on those experiences to actually help carve out what we want the future to look like. And what are some key areas that we want to take a look at in general from this exercise. And when you look at your event, our invitation is to really spend some more time doing this exercise. Be very honest with what are some of those negative and positive events. And then currently you can mark that lifeline up to today, but we also invite you to think about what does that future lifeline look like? And what are some of the events that you want to hone in on that actually are attached to your past, but what you want to create for the future? So now let's move on to your values. Barbara will play a clip for us in a little while about values. Many of us learned this in school as well. If you want to use the chat function again, what are some of the personal values that you live by currently? Many of you already disclosed and shared authenticity is quite key, and that's also perhaps why you joined today's session. What are some of the values that you live by today? And thanks, Luis. I will share some of the questions in the chat as well. So Rebecca, thank you. Transparency. So it's very important to be transparent with others and to also perhaps be let others be transparent with you. That motivates perhaps friendships and relationships. Knowing oneself, accountability, open-mindedness and respect for others. So really, really great. These are key things that are coming from perhaps some life event that you experience that are quite grounded into your soul and who you are as a person. Impact over intent. Thanks, Luis. So, definition of values. Many of us have heard this, but just as a recap, our values are principles or standards that guide our behavior. They're fundamental beliefs that guide our actions, and it's influenced by our culture and our upbringing, or as we just discussed, key events. What I'll do is invite Barbara to share a video with us right now that just gives a little bit of a brief overview, a bit more around values, and then we'll do another exercise to hone in on this a little bit more.
I think, and everyone understands that the values that you may have or your company may have, they're the guidelines, the guideposts, the things that help you make the right decisions for the long-term benefit of the business or yourself. But what a lot of people don't understand is that values don't do anything when they're sitting in your reception lobby or if they're in the employee manual. Values are brought to life when you live them, when you talk them, when you act them. That's what matters. So find ways to literally bring your value statements, either verbatim or your own set of words, into your conversations with your team, into the conversations with your clients and your partners and your customers. Tell them who you are so they can either resonate with you or get out of your way.
Thank you, Barbara. So a very brief clip, but I liked the sentence at the end, which is really, I think someone talked about being transparent, letting others know who we are, and if it aligns, great, but if it doesn't, we want them to move out of our way, or we may need to reposition ourselves. So what I'd like you to do is just take a little bit of time, and I would like to have you rethink your values. And on the screen, there's a website that I'd like you to open up another tab and go to. And it's called Personal Value without the E.es. And the instructions are here. And I will also take this off the screen for a moment, but put it in the chat for you to go to this website and follow these instructions here. If you want to go to this website and go ahead and actually click Start the Test at personalvalue.es. And that's personal value without the E. And I would like you to just spend a couple of minutes actually reassessing your values and choosing as many as you would like, but before you click the submit button, you would only are able to submit 10 values. I want you to capture what are those values that really resonate with you, and you may have a little bit more than 10, but I want you to then go ahead and just select the 10 and then go ahead and share what some of those values are in the chat again. And we can see whether or not that resonated with what you disclosed or if it's something different. So I've put the address that you can go to, the web address, which again is personal value, V for Victor, A for Alpha, L for Larry, U for under, .es. Put it also in the chat and spend another 3-4 minutes submitting and clicking which values resonate with you. And although it may be very difficult, try and get it down to just 10, and then let me know what some of those values are and what that experience was like for you. So a very good question that Brandon asked. Should we choose innate values or values that we would like to acquire and improve? So Brandon and everyone, we invite you to choose innate values, the values that resonate with who you are today, that is helping to guide your actions and your decisions with who you are today. These values will change and evolve over time, but we're interested in the values that you currently have. You may select more than 10, but at the end, you'll only be able to submit 10, and we're curious about what values you have today. Thanks for the question, Brandon. Jess, this is so tricky. You're absolutely right. Values change and evolve over time. And when we're choosing one over the other, it can be so hard. So it's okay. Luckily, you will have more time to go back through this as well. But we're going to ask you to really choose. You can choose more than 10 and make a note of what they are. But when you submit it, just submit only 10.
Hi everyone, we're just experiencing a few technical issues. Mark Johnson will be live back on this session. Please give us a few minutes. Thank you.
Apologies, everyone. There was a fire alarm going off at the building.
Hi, Mark. Everything okay?
Yes, luckily we're all fine and safe, but apologies,
Perfect.
the fire alarm was going off.
No worries at all. You're good to go.
Perfect. So thank you all just for your patience as we went through that. And what I'm doing is just taking a look at some of the responses that you both have said. I think Jess kicked it off with it being hard, and Brandon asked us about whether or not it's now or what we aspire to be. Sophia, thank you for sharing. Also very difficult. Peace, pleasure, health, authenticity, all good. Brandon, making me deep, go into my life. Good, mission accomplished. Saname, tolerance, ambition, meaningful work, uniqueness, really good. Control and pleasure, and Toby, teamwork, wisdom. So really great. And it sounds like it was quite difficult for some of you as well, just in terms of trying to filter that down. And when you click on the report that could be sent to you, actually the report further drills it down to just 5 versus 10, because it really is looking for what is at the root cause of your value system. And I think Brandon may have teed this up earlier. It's okay if this changes over time, because values mean so much to us. And I think, as some of you said, this is why it was so difficult and hard, because we have many different values. And this test only really assumes a few of them, but we have some other assessments that really list even more, such as diversity and other areas that may not have been captured. The key part here that we want to focus on with our values is really ensuring that we remember what has our lifeline taught us. What are those key events that transpired? Those key events have really shaped those true values, many of what you shared, meaningfulness, transparency, pleasure, health, those values that you shared are connected to the root cause, which is the life event that you started drafting earlier. Why does it matter? Individuals and leaders lean on their values and the organizations to drive self-fulfillment and organization performance. So it's attached to who you are and where you came from and what you're contributing, but it's also attached to how you are a leader in your team, whether or not you manage others, but it's very much attached to actually the type of behavior you emanate with others. The values define how you and your team and or the team that you manage operate, behave, and interact on a daily basis. And it carries little weight unless they are attached to direct activities and behaviors that transpire for you on a day-to-day basis. So I think going back to some of the questions earlier, it's okay if some of the values change over time. It's okay if we have more than 10, but actually there are probably some values that have remained with us from when we were younger to where we are now, and this will constantly change. And if it changes, it's actually okay, because that shows that we're growing in our journey and we're not staying rooted just in the past, but we're open to recreating that. But some parts of our values may remain the same because our life events are unchangeable, but our future events are actually where we can apply a different direction with some values that we're starting to actually go ahead and possess. So this takes us to self-awareness. What does self-awareness mean to all of you? And I'll also just put the question in the chat as well, as Luis told us earlier. Thank you, Luis, for that. What are some key words or principles about self-awareness? Knowing thyself. Perfect. So knowing what actually really makes us thrive, and the reverse, even knowing, I use the word, what are some of our pet peeves as well. Barbara will soon play a video that we'll go through as well, but what I wanted to do is give a bit more insight about self-awareness. And thank you, Luis, in terms of also knowing what you're strong in, but also knowing what you can do to improve. So when it comes to self-awareness, and we do this in psychology as well, so many times when I would counsel and coach others, it would be looking at who they are individually and also looking at externally how the world interacts with them. So for the purpose of this conversation, we want to split self-awareness into two parts: internal awareness and external awareness. Internal awareness is what Louise and Brandon and Rebecca, all that you made mention of actually, which is knowing our values, our passions, and those events that really have made us who we are today, and how that is driving each of our actions. And the scientific correlation to that is if we hold true to our values, if we are quite conscious about who we are and the events that created us, positive or negative, it will lead to higher job satisfaction, relationship satisfaction, and life satisfaction, which ultimately leads to happiness. The second component is external awareness. So I could be very knowledgeable about who I am, and sometimes I come across this when I'm working HR. Individuals are very confident in what they want to do and how they want to do it, but they are less conscious about the impact of how they deliver their message or how they're coming across to others. And sometimes this is what prevents individuals from being promoted or getting another role, or actually really being agreeable with some other team members, because they're very confident about who they are, but they may actually not be very confident about how others see them. So the second component of self-awareness is understanding how other people view us. And the key scientific correlation is, if we are quite confident about our values and what we're looking to actually project into the world, but how others receive us is not actually similar to that, and they would say something very different, then that shows that there's a bit of a discord. And when others can see us just as we see ourselves, then actually that helps us and them be more empathetic with our cause, because they're seeing our true, authentic life event and storyline and values come through. But if our values and our storyline is very different to what is projected to the world, that actually is where the discord may exist as well. Perfect. So what does this mean across the spectrum? On the screen, what I've done is to the left-hand side, this is a graph that just shows what actually makes a person a little less self-aware and what makes a person very self-aware. So on the left-hand side, a seeker. A seeker could be someone who doesn't yet know who they are, what they stand for, or how their teams see them, and they may feel stuck or frustrated. So a lot of times I see this with individuals that are constantly not getting the job that they want. They may not be getting the relationship that they want. They may not actually be able to move forward in their life because something is keeping them stuck. So what we tend to do is call these individuals seekers, where they're trying to get to the root cause, but they're not able to really understand what are some of those life events that are attached to their values, that's attached to their internal awareness that is preventing them. Then you go up a notch, and then you have a little bit more heightened self-awareness with the introspectors. And these are individuals that actually do know who they are, but they're not able to challenge their own views. So I come across this very often. And recently I was trying to give someone feedback in terms of their CV and why they could not get a role, but they were very confident about who they were and what they wanted to project out into the world. They actually didn't really want too much of the feedback because they wanted to stay true to their CV style, what they wanted to do and how they wanted to come across in an interview, that they were not open to other views or blind spots that was preventing them from securing that role. So these individuals, we would say that they're a bit low on self-awareness because actually they're either a seeker and not clear at all about who they are, and they're unable to really identify those key events, positive and negative, to then their values, to then actually their awareness. On the right-hand side, these are people that are actually more self-aware. So pleasers or people pleasers. They can be so focused on appearing a certain way to others that they could be overlooking what matters to them. So some of these individuals are very empathetic and emotive, and they know actually how to work with others. But the concern is they do not know actually how to own their own emotions. I think someone mentioned it earlier in terms of who they are and being transparent. I'm just checking. Can you all still hear me? It seems like Alita can't hear anything. Okay, perfect. Great, thank you. So sometimes when I, for instance, interview others, I see individuals come into the interview and they really just want to get the job, but they will agree with anything I say, or they may be so into people pleasing that they just want to make sure I'm happy, and they may give me the very kind of cookie cutter answers within the interview. But when I look for individuals at TikTok, within my own team, I look for individuals that are authentic, that are very aware of their imperfections and their perfections, and that are unapologetically unafraid to be who they are and still contribute their true value to a team outside of whether or not it's perceived to be great or not, but they are open to actually bringing their complete self to the organization, to the team, and thus helping the team thrive. And that brings us to the higher end of the self-awareness, which is someone who is very aware. They know who they are, they know what they want to accomplish, they seek it out, and they value others' opinions, even if it's constructive or positive, and they're able to integrate it, and they're unafraid of criticism because they're able to actually use it to still connect to their life events, their values, and actually create further life events through their lives. And toward the end here, individuals that work within teams, the key part here for leadership is that individuals and leaders must actively work on seeing themselves very clearly and being very true to who they are. But in order to be very self-aware, we need to make sure that others see the same thing. And if not, that actually is letting us know that we're going toward the left-hand side versus the right-hand side. So what I'll do is invite Barbara just to give us some key tips by playing a video of how do we become more self-aware and continue to evolve that over time. We'll just see a brief clip from Tasha Urich, who actually wrote a book about self-awareness and goes into a lot more depth. And at the end of this presentation, you will get some resources that we've touched on today, but I'll invite Barbara to go and discuss this.
So what are 3 techniques or strategies to help someone become more self-aware? In the course of researching my book, Insight, one of the things we did was very exhaustively examine these people that we called unicorns. Now, unicorns are people that did not start out as highly self-aware as adults and made absolutely transformational improvements in their level of self-awareness. And based on the things they taught me, I can suggest 3 things. The first is really a mindset. It's to make the decision that I want to know the truth. That's one of the things in my book that I call braver, but wiser. Number 2 is simply to get more feedback. One of the things we see over and over again in the research on this is that other people can usually see us far more objectively than we see ourselves. The third tool is a little bit counterintuitive. A lot of times when people try to become more self-aware, they ask themselves why. Why did I do this? Why do I want that? But what my research has found pretty shockingly is that those questions don't result in any more insight. So the tool I recommend is called what, not why. So instead of asking, for example, why did I say something so mean to my husband? You might say, what do I want to do to change our relationship? One person that's a great anecdote of what happens when you improve your self-awareness is an executive I worked with a few years back. Let's call him Steve. And although Steve thought he was pretty amazing, he was doing a terrible job of leading that function. His people were intimidated by him. He would start yelling and screaming at them with the slightest provocation, and he clearly had absolutely no idea how he was coming across. And once we went through that process of getting feedback from his team, understanding the things he needed to work on, things like asking questions, showing empathy, being compassionate, things that he had completely missed in his career to date, Steve was able to completely turn around not just his own performance and not just his team's performance, but the way his function was performing from both a sort of work attitude and a morale standpoint, and also, probably more importantly, bottom line business results.
Thank you, Barbara. So, what enables us to become self-aware? Experience. We talked about this through the Lifeline, and it's really being open. And I think someone made mention of it earlier, being open to feedback and understanding, and it's what we call in psychology, the root cause. Sometimes when we work with individuals, and we see this a lot, for instance, with substance abuse, individuals who go to drugs or alcohol in excess are sometimes so unable to access their feelings because of past trauma or hurt, but this experience is at the root cause as to what is causing some of the behavior today. So the reason we did the Lifeline earlier was to actually identify those high and low moments and really understanding what are the root causes that are creating those values and that are attributing our self-awareness currently and onward. Power. We didn't spend a lot of time here, but by power, what we mean is not overestimating one's skills and abilities, but also some of you may be in a senior role, managing others. And sometimes individuals that are more junior than us, or that may not have as high a position, sometimes more senior individuals may not get all the feedback that they need because people are afraid to give it to them for whatever reason, due to perception, hierarchy. And the key part here is that how do individuals stay open, irrespective of what role they have, externally or internally, to ensure that they are able to receive feedback, constructive and positive, that supports them wherever they're at in an organization and in life. Asking what and not why. So again, Tasha elaborated on this. Why don't I have a boyfriend right now? Why am I not getting that job? Why am I unable to really get the career or the promotion or the rating that I want? Instead of asking why, what do I need to do differently to really change my view? What do I need to change within my CV, or actually with the individuals that I am becoming friends with, to actually change the type of relationship or dynamic that I want in life? And how do I balance those viewpoints? Someone also made mention of it as well, which is ensuring that I am getting feedback from others that are as successful or even not, that are able to let me know what is some candid feedback that they have from me. And for instance, at TikTok, we're going through our year-end process right now where individuals are getting feedback on their performance, what worked well and what didn't. And sometimes people are able to receive it, but sometimes people get very defensive. And at the end of the day, it's about actually, how do we stay true to who we are, but actually listen to others and hear the feedback about how we're received. And I receive constructive feedback. I also receive positive feedback, but it's able to actually take it off the chin and be able to integrate it so that it constantly is an ebb and flow. And then constantly building awareness so that whatever we're aware of today is a stepping stone to being more self-aware tomorrow, and even more aware, so that actually the external awareness that we're hearing from others just goes hand in hand, and we're never out of sync with our internal awareness and self-awareness. And Alexandra, thanks for sharing your thoughts about critiquing yourself as well. Appreciate that. So this brings us to the very end here about authentic leadership. What does authenticity make us feel? Many of you talked about this earlier. It's transparent, it's being honest, it's being trusting, it's really being able to express your true self. These are all associated with very positive themes. It's very, very likely that you will feel attracted to people who are authentic. You really love seeing them in action, or you love actually interacting with them. The same holds true for those that are inauthentic. How many of you have come across people that are inauthentic? How does that make you feel? If you just want to jot that down quickly in the chat before we wrap up. So, exactly. I love that you all are being very direct, suspicious, exhausting, guarded, definitely not the fake people. You're all spot on. Inauthenticity, you know, I also am not a fan of phoniness. I'm not a fan of people who conform to different environments. It's one thing to know your audience and how you may need to shape a message, but it's another when you conform and actually you become different in different settings and suppress who you truly are, because ultimately that's denigrating your story, your values, and yourself, which is bringing you further on the left-hand side of that grid that we looked at about your self-awareness. What are the risks and benefits? Unhappiness, low self-esteem and emotion, tiredness. Can you imagine if you went through life being inauthentic and not being true to your values? It's actually disrespecting your life's journey and your work. And I see this all the time with individuals, sometimes at work, that are just not motivated, and they may do the bare minimum and they're just exhausted, sometimes due to life's elements, such as we're going through a pandemic right now. So that's completely normal, but sometimes it's because there's a misalignment. They're just really disconnected from others. But imagine the benefits when you're authentic. You are happy, you are positive, you have great self-esteem, you're living your truth, you're able to actually deep dive and recognize those parts of you that are great and not so great and create a better future. And also you're open to being vulnerable as well. So the key part of why authenticity matters is because it helps really build and strengthen strong relationships. Underneath relationships, friends, your significant other, family, or work is trust. If there's no trust, there is no relationship. Teams that are authentic and that invite authenticity have higher productivity. Science has shown it, because people are not spending time thinking about what they're not doing or what they're concealing or imposter syndromes. They're actually being true to who they are and what their values are, thus making a positive environment. And if you are in that environment, then actually you can't burn out. You can't really be unhappy, because you're constantly focused on being your true authentic self and bringing it to others and being with others and joining companies that share your values versus companies that do not, which is thus empowering. So, key takeaways and a summary for today. Why did we go through some of those exercises? Your story is so important. And particularly at work, sometimes we don't share our stories as much. You know, I may not open up through every introduction and really tell all of those details, but over time, I want to be connected to my coworkers, to my manager, to individuals I'm working with, and I don't want to conceal everything. And the key part here is that your story is who you are. We want to respect that. And particularly those of you attending the conference, we hold diverse stories, and that is so important to begin sharing. Each life event is intended to help you actualize and reach your potential. And there is a pattern. If you start actually finishing your lifeline and looking at your values and how it's evolving, there's going to be an anchor. And there's a pattern there as to why you are focused on the type of career you're focused on, the type of partner you're choosing. And actually, it strengthens what you want the world to see that's visible and invisible. And it leverages and acknowledges your strengths. Your values direct your thoughts, words, and actions. It will actually be attached to how fulfilled you feel or how unfulfilled you feel. And remember, feeling fulfilled will make us feel probably at the top of the world and high. When we're in therapy and when we meet with others, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a problem, but when individuals are depressed, when they're anxious, when they have self-esteem issues, that lets us know usually that individuals are not aligned. And then when I see it in HR, I usually see it when someone is not operating at their best, but they're constantly just not able to deliver. And sometimes I will spend time coaching them to look at what actually is it that you want to do in life. How does that come about through your life events? And what strengths do you have that we really need to shine the light on? And as our life evolves, so do our values. So some of you who experience the difficulty and the challenge, it's okay. Your values will change over time, and that means that you're growing and you're changing as well. We talked about internal awareness, which is, again, really knowing your identity and your values and being very aware of how that's driving behavior, and vice versa, being very receptive and open to feedback and using that in your journey so that it no longer becomes personal. It just becomes a necessity in order for you to actualize and continue to self-improve and grow and lead to higher fulfillment. And lastly, this brings us to then how we become authentic leaders. It helps our story to be actualized and to help us be our true selves. Science proves this is what leads us to actually leading positive lives. And actually, if we lead a positive life and we're very true to who we are, imagine the teams that we create, the people we invite, and what we can actually accomplish, and how that heightens productivity in our teams as an individual leader or as someone that is managing others. With that said, what I'd like to do is just end with 2 quotes here. When you show up authentic, you create the space for others to do the same. Walk in your truth. The more we, particularly those of us that are diverse, and everyone is, but the more you bring to the table, it invites others to be just as authentic without concealing. The second quote, authenticity is everything. You have to wake up every day and look in the mirror, and you want to be proud of the person that's looking back at you. And you can only do that if you're honest with yourself and being a person of high character. You have an opportunity every single day to write that story of your life or reflect on that lifeline and also create a future one. So I really want to thank you. I know many of you are busy and you've spent so much time today with us and through the conference, but thank you for spending time at this event. Thank you for sharing and disclosing what you did. What I'd like to do is really just open it up for any final questions in the last few minutes that we have. And Barbara and the team will help share resources that we went through today alongside the presentation for some of you who had technical difficulties. And I am accessible via LinkedIn for some of you who would like to connect after and continue the conversation. Perfect. Great to meet many of you. And hopefully once the pandemic is over, we get to see each other again in person and do a lot more activity to help us really realize our potential.